Hello humans, we have got a treat for you today. We are very lucky to be joined by my good friend and master prosthetics artist, Sangeet Prabhaker. Dude, welcome.
Hello, dude.
So good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
So Sangeet has created all manner of prosthetics, wounds, slashes, gunshots for anything from Red Dwarf, Mighty Boosh, Game of Thrones, through to Dark Knight Rises. He's even working right now on Ridley Scott's latest film, which I don't think we're probably allowed to talk about, which is fine because we've got something far more important to talk about, which is the democratization of prosthetics and makeup effects. But before we get into how we can make prosthetics more accessible, I think it's really important to first understand the process of creating a bespoke prosthetics makeup. Dude, I know this is a really big one, but is there a way you could kind of give us just a kind of an idea of the kind of beginning to end process if a production comes to you to create a makeup?
Sure. I think there's two aspects, right? You know, you've got the creative kind of design and narrative element of it, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, what is the character? Is it an aging makeup? Is it a creature? Is it a trauma makeup? And then you've got the technical side, which is the life casting and sculpting, mold making, you know, what we call lab work.
Right.
So it's a kind of marriage of those two things.
Yeah, so like the design might come from the art department if they've got something really specific in mind.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they'll be like, this is sort of what we want, can you come up with a
sure,
look?
yeah, of course. If there's a big franchise, right, then, you know, they're referencing established characters and things like that. So they would have had concept artists working with art department very early on. You know, they'll have a script and they'll give you a script and they're like, this is what we want, you know, and roughly what can you do? In that case, we would take over earlier on, you know, and work on concepts with using Photoshop and things like that to come up with an idea of what the thing could look like.
Let's say, for an example, you're creating some kind of monster face makeup, right? That's going to be applied to a human. Yeah. So just kind of basically, what are the steps?
So you do a life cast. So your actor comes in, we basically use silicone rubber and make an impression of their head. So we've then got a duplicate of them in plaster or resin or something like that. Then you sculpt your character on top of that in plasticine or clay, and then you make a negative mold. Right, so you start off with your kind of positive shape. You know, you create your new thing and you make a negative, and then those two things form the mold, and then you cast out appliances which you then stick on.
Right, so it fits the actor's face perfectly because that's from that cast.
Yeah, it's a prosthetic, right? So it's an extension of the human face, or it's an extension of the surface that you're applying it to.
And then of course once you've got that made, you will then do a fitting on your actor, see how that's working.
Testing is really important with prosthetics,
And so what kind of things get revealed when you're in that testing phase? What kind of problems, or this is working, that's not working?
There might be situations where the prosthetic isn't the issue, and it's how you're going to colour it maybe. Right. You know, so you want to do tests to maybe try out variations on different colours if it's more of a creature type thing, you know. Or other times when it's quite subtle, delicate aging prosthetics, for example, you just need time to get used to applying it and knowing what works, how does it fit. Like half the time, you're still figuring out the best way to run the pieces in the mould. So the first times you're like, I'm just going to bash out pieces so I can get an overall look. Right. And a lot of the rest of the time, you're just kind of cogitating over in your head as to how things fit. You know, you might be working with a wig that isn't still finished and things like that. So a lot of the time earlier on, you're just trying to see how do these different elements that you're creating become, you know, how do they start to fit together? Sure.
I actually had a quick chat with a DP friend of mine this morning, like as I was sort of getting ready for this chat that we're going to have, and he actually sort of said how his experience of prosthetics as a DP, he's like, I just wish they would include me sooner, because if they don't know how I'm going to light it or where that person is going to be, you know, like he had someone for a shoot, they had someone doing a skull cap. And like, we're going to be shooting next to a window in 4.6K, like, it's almost impossible to get it as seamless so that it won't be seen at this high resolution and all that kind of thing. And they're like, no, it'd be fine. And I think, this wasn't a high budget movie. And so I think he was just very aware, like, we're going to see it. No one listened to him. Sure enough, they got there and they could just see it, and people got upset. The AD was raving at the makeup artist because it wasn't perfect, and and they ended up just kind of shooting it very differently.
There's two things there, right?
Yeah.
You got the hubris of the makeup artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, perhaps the lack of insight on behalf of production.
But that's a problem all the time, right?
Course,
people not understanding everyone's roles and how different things affect different
and
things.
just also assuming that because you've achieved something similar once before, that you'll be able to get it bang on first time the next time round.
Right,
Do you know what I mean?
right.
Like I said, all we do is just build individual Lego blocks, right? Individual elements.
Yeah.
But it's how they come together that creates the end construct, right?
Yeah.
And that takes time and attention.
Yeah. So I think the point that we're trying to get across here is that it's a very involved process, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of skill. And that's not always possible for all productions to be able to afford to bring someone like yourself in to do that kind of the molds, the testing and all of that. And so this is kind of leading us nicely into our main sort of topic of discussion for today, really, which is something certainly that you're pushing for in your work, and something that I recognize as something I think is really great and really important, which is the democratization of prosthetics, and how we can sort of make it more accessible to lower budget productions, right?
Sure. I mean, that process is happening throughout film, right? I mean, prosthetics is part of the film, and they go hand in hand.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's happening as technologies become more available, different materials become available. I know that we've obviously pointed that out on our channel about, how cameras are getting cheaper and cleverer and smarter, and allowing us to come up with some pretty cinematic images if we put our minds to it. It is becoming more accessible. Yeah. And what I love is that you're on the prosthetics end of that thing. Okay, so on the other side of the coin, Sangeet and I first met here at the studio when there was a music video shoot on, and the incomparable James Hankins contacted you about getting some prosthetics together. Yeah. Now, it was a music video, and as such, obviously, they didn't have any money, probably. Did he have specific characters in mind? And then he said, can you do me a cyclops, a devil, and a pig man? Yeah, or was it a case of, I need some groovy characters, what's out there that we could get for reasonably cheap?
I think it was a bit of both, right? I think it was... it started off as the conversation, I want to do some prosthetics, I need some characters, some prosthetic characters, but I know nothing about prosthetics, really, right? So what are the options? And obviously he's going to understand that custom-made prosthetics are going to be really expensive and take a lot of time, which are two things he didn't have, right? But he also had the Cyclops in mind because of the iconography that Pictish Trail uses of eyes, of single eyes and things like that. Right. So there was that. Now, I knew he didn't have time or anything, and I didn't want to kind of waste his time with anything either. And what I like about the way the industry has gone since I've got into it is just the availability of decent ready-made prosthetics. Right. When I was a kid, there kind of wasn't any at all. Sure. Not really. I mean, I remember seeing a Freddy Krueger DIY makeup kit in Forbidden Planet, but it cost like 80 quid or something.
Whoa.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah, when in the early 90s or whatever. So it was just totally unavailable. But now, you've got guys like RBFX who ended up supplying the stuff that we used for James's video. There's a lot of people that are established in the effects industry that are also into kind of making it more accessible for people and understand that, it's ultimately self-defeating if we only want to
closing the doors.
Yeah, close the doors and only want to do super high-end, stuff when I like the technical side of sitting in my workshop and sculpting and making moulds.
And making perfection,
Yeah, but that'd be boring as well, wouldn't it, if I just sat on my own all day, I like being on set and I want to be able to meet people and interact, you know? So I just suggested, dude, go and check out RBFX, check out this company. He's an LA-based established makeup guy, and there's plenty of characters that you can choose from. When I was a kid, there was just Fangoria magazine, and that was it, right? But now any kid can pick up Instagram and find out very quickly who's doing what, where, you know, and learn off that same platform as well.
Yeah. So. All right, so what are some of the things to consider if you're looking to buy a sort of, as it were, off-the-shelf prosthetic? What should people be thinking about when they're like, oh yeah, I need a Cyclops face, I'll order that?
Well, I suppose it's, the core of it is you've got what material is the prosthetic made out of,
right.
you know? So you've kind of
there
got...
are options.
There are options, yeah. You've kind of got three materials that we make prosthetics out of, okay? We've got latex and foamed latex, which is the old school original material. It's super lightweight, moves beautifully, but it's completely opaque, so it doesn't really look like skin, okay? And then somewhere in the middle maybe you've got gelatin. Okay, which is translucent and soft, not as stretchy though, a bit stiff, and obviously made from animals, so that's going to be a problem for some people. And now generally the mainstream material is silicone rubber, which looks like skin, displaces and stretches like skin, but it's quite expensive.
Okay. As always, the best thing is cost the most. Yeah. I guess you've also got to think about, actor allergies. Some people are...
Indeed, yeah. You know, the silicones that we use are cosmetic grades, so they're completely non-allergenic, but some people do have latex allergies.
Right, okay, so that's something to bear in mind as well.
Indeed, yeah.
And then another thing I know we want to talk about a little bit as well, which is kind of the availability of prosthetics in different skin tones. Surprise, surprise, the sort of default, the synonymous colour is Caucasian. Right?
Yeah, or as we call it in the makeup industry, flesh tone.
Oh, flesh. So all flesh is Caucasian by default.
Apparently
so.
Oh,
that's interesting. Who decided that? I wonder. Okay, so that's the situation we're in. What are there many people, let's say, in the industry? Are there many companies or individuals who are making steps to change that?
There's always been different materials available and pigments and things like that, and it's not like no one's ever done a good prosthetic on dark skin, right? I mean, just look at Coming to America, for example, right? So that was all foam latex as well, so he's using acrylic paints and makeups to then paint them and things like that, you know? Now that we're using silicone, stuff is pigmented intrinsically, you know? So it becomes more about skill as well as how good you are at achieving the colours you want, right? Certainly, you know, you can buy materials and pigments and colours and makeup palettes for all skin tones. In terms of the democratization of it, I think it's then about branding that becomes an issue. You know?
How do you mean?
Well, like we said, the default is Caucasian flesh, you know, and then anything after that has the word dark. Somehow attached to it.
It's like an other.
Whereas like in India, there's no word for vegetarian food. It's just food. But then if you want meat, it's non-veg. Right. So
sure. Yeah. It's perspective, I guess.
It's perspective on what is the default and what it's supposed to be the default.
And there shouldn't be a default, basically. Okay, so you can apply any kind of skin tone makeup to a prosthetic and create that whatever skin tone that suits your actor. Does having a base tone to the prosthetic, does that make a big difference? Does it, I assume that makes it a lot easier for the artist? Or?
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing about using silicone, right? Is that you can intrinsically colour it and almost back paint it into the mould if you so wish. And we use flock as well, like tiny little nylon fibres, to give it the appearance of having blood vessels and for the light to bounce off it in interesting ways and things like that.
All those little skin details. The next thing we want to chat about is you've obviously noticed a sort of shortfall in variations of prosthetics and certainly in availability of these things to sort of lower budget productions.
Yeah, and who they're sculpted on as well, right? So you can buy an old age makeup in whatever skin tone you want, but it still looks like an old European person.
Right, okay. Like, as in, so different people age differently.
Of course.
Yeah, there just needs to be a basic recognition of that and more variation.
I think if you want to talk about availability of ready-made prosthetics and generic fitting prosthetics, then if you want to use the term generic, then yes, you have to appeal to everyone.
Yes. So to address this shortfall, Sangeet started his own company called Studio Sangeet, which essentially is this kind of idea of kind of off-the-shelf prosthetics and also ways to essentially make it more accessible to, I guess, people who are studying prosthetics, to people who want to practice but don't necessarily have, the means to creating molds and things like that. But if they had I am always confused by molds and casts, and I never know which is right.
So a mold is a physical object that you use repeatedly.
Right, okay.
And a cast is essentially a copy that you make.
Gotcha. Right. So what we've got on the table here, so in this case, which can be purchased online at studio@sangeet.com. So you've got some molds in this case that then people can create their own casts of. So they can then fill with silicone and create their own and start experimenting with that, right?
Totally, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I love it. And so what kind of stuff have you got here?
Well, here I've kind of got a little selection. I've got some wounds, right? I've got what is now quite an advanced prosthetic. This is what I'd call a contoured transfer appliance, right? So this is, you can see the pinky, fleshy pillet piece in there. And then this, what you see here, is the actual mold that the appliance was cast into.
Right.
It's been made such a way that the appliance stays into the mold until the last minute, and you essentially put your glue on there, and press it into place and peel away the mold.
Right.
It just makes the whole process super quick in terms of application.
Right.
You can also make your silicone incredibly soft. I mean, that's another good thing about rubber, is that we modify the softness of it.
Yeah.
So if I need something that to be quite stiff, like a nose, for example, nose doesn't really move, I can make it stiff.
Right.
Or if I wanted to make it super soft, like a neck, I can do so. This is actually...
And that's all by varying the quantities of certain components.
Yeah. And what's nice about silicone, the mold is essentially the same rubber as the appliance.
Right, okay.
Just different levels of softener. Yeah.
And what I can't help but notice, as we get to the edges of these prosthetics, I mean, they get so thin. So I'm assuming that way, when you apply it...
To give you an idea,
yeah.
You got something that just completely disappears.
Amazing.
So it's super soft.
Because I'm guessing, like, probably on the cheaper end of sort of off-the-shelf prosthetics, let's just say right down the cheaper end, like say in a joke shop or something like that. It's gonna, the edge is going to be heavy, and you're going to have to do a lot of work to feather that out, right? And so with this kind of stuff, it's so thin that I'm guessing there really almost isn't really an edge.
I know I'm doing my job well when I put a prosthetic on, and without doing anything other than just blending that, dissolving this edge away onto the skin, I can't see an edge. That's when you've done your job well.
Yeah. Before makeup even begins.
Or you fool an actor. Like I've fooled other actors.
Right.
Where they've been in a scene all day with someone wearing, essentially completely covered in prosthetics, a bald cap actually.
Really?
Yeah. And only after, when my guy's back in the chair and I've kind of opened up the ball cap and I'm literally cutting his head off, right? The actor's walked in and
you're not bald.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Respect.
Thank
you. So have you got any kind of tutorials online at the moment in terms of how to work with this stuff?
Well, I mean, so when I started my company and I've got my flat mold system, the nice thing about these flat molds is, like I said, normally with a prosthetic is a positive and a negative shape that interacts to create the piece, but with open molds or flatbed molds or just flat molds, it's just a case of pouring your rubber in, scraping that flat surface to get that feathered edge, and then that's it, right?
Yeah. So this is something that a makeup artist or training prosthetics artist or a prosthetic artist could order, and they can basically make because they've got the molds here, they can make as many of those as they need. If they're on a shoot where they need the same mold, but they're going to need to reproduce it fresh so many times.
Yeah, indeed. And I'm not the only person selling molds, right? But what I try to do again in the idea of not just selling molds, but also teaching people how to use them. Right. So you get my flat molds and you'll get instructions on how to use them.
So there's literally a step-by-step guide.
There's literally a step-by-step guide in the tin on how to use the molds and just basically how to apply it as a transfer as well. So you could run your silicone in there and then just press it onto the skin and peel this away. Amazing. Yeah, man. Yeah.
So good. And then we have to just have a quick look at these. So tell me what this is all about.
Again, I was just racking my brain over, when you want to get into this stuff, you have to buy tins and tins of A and B silicone and your softener, and you've got your cap plastic and pigments and And like we were saying, you know, there's so much skill involved in getting the right amount of pigment and the right colours and choosing all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And again, I was seeing that you can buy all the Caucasian skin tones you want, but then if you've got to buy you couldn't really buy pigments that I thought you could buy a dark flesh, but I just didn't think it was very good either. Right. So I just wanted to combine all these things that weren't there, and I was racking my brain, how do I, you know I can pre-color silicon, how do I deliver it? Right. And then I just came up with that.
You're a genius. I love this. So these are the two components that you need.
Yeah, I've pre-mixed it in a way that I'm not going to give away, right? But you've got there's two components in this one bag, separated by a little clip. Yeah. The clip, I'm not going to do it now, but this just slides off.
So that pulls away, and then you can combine those components.
Yeah, you combine the two in the bag. You can just mix it by hand. Yeah. And it pours straight out. Snip the end off and just pours it straight out.
Oh, I love it. So good.
I use them in my own workshop. I promised myself I wouldn't.
Right, but it's so easy. It's right
there. It's so easy.
You're using your own product, man.
Yeah, I know. Oh, you're not supposed to use your
No, that's what they say. I don't know what we're talking about now. So what have we got here? Encapsulating beads for making silicone gel prosthetics.
Yeah, so the silicone prosthetic has two elements, right? We call this silicone gel just for the sake of knowing that you're talking about a soft thing, right? Okay. But it is very jelly-like, right? So it's sticky and it's stretchy. It's kind of like the toys that you throw against your window, but even softer and stickier. Right. So it needs a kind of skin, an encapsulation, right? And that's what these beads are. So
these melt down?
Yeah, they just dissolve in acetone. It's essentially a plastic that gets dissolved in solvent, and you spray it with an airbrush or a spray gun or something like that into your mould. Right. And it's blendable, it's dissolvable. Right. So back in the day, again, even with foam latex, you're relying on the squeeze of the mould to create that finished nice edge. You know, they used to call it a cutting edge. Right. Because if it's bad, you'd have to cut it with a pair of scissors. Right. So yeah, that's these are the two components to then make your prosthetic.
To be clear, this is like high grade stuff that is being made available to people very affordably, and not like you say, you don't have to buy it in bulk, which is really nice. So literally for one short film or one feature where they just need one thing, someone's not going to necessarily have to buy in a whole load of stuff. Or if they just want to try stuff, they don't need to invest loads of money to have a go.
No. And you don't need, there's a lot of, like I said, lab work involved as well. So I've got, like I said, I've got, spray guns and and I've got a vacuum degasser for sucking all the air out of my silicone when I mix it in a cup.
Such a cool thing to look at, because it was like, I felt like I was looking at that's like space in there. Yeah. You sort of see all these bubbles just being removed. Vacuums, man, terrifying. Dude, this has been so great to have this chat and to show. We just really wanted to show everyone this stuff is available now. Everything is becoming more available now, thanks to wonderful people like Sangeet, who are helping democratize the industry in its various departments. Open some doors and give people a chance to give these things a go. Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
If anyone wants to have a look at this stuff that's available, go to studiosangeet.com and sample his wares. Thanks, man. And stay tuned, because Sangeet is going to be returning and getting a little more gruesome, a little more visceral on your next visit would be much appreciated.
It'll be good fun. I'll bring my overalls next time.
Yes. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell icon so that you can stay updated and know when our videos are coming out. See you guys.